So yeah, this is the first time that we've done this, so I hope anyone who's watching will bear with us.
Oh yes, it's exciting though, isn't it? This is the first time we've actually gone live on Facebook, so really interesting and exciting.
It's fantastic. So the reason we decided to do this, sorry, I don't have anything wrong with me, just this always happens when I'm about to be my nose starts running.
Oh yes, I've got my hankies here as well.
So we decided to do this because we were reading so many comments from parents who are homeschooling their children, and particularly those who have dyslexia, and just a lot of the struggles that they're really having at this time, because they're having to deal with obviously so much, not just the homeschooling, but everything else that's going on as well. But to add on top of that, children who've got a difficulty in terms of spelling.
Really tough. I mean, I'm a retired head teacher, you know, decades and decades of experience, and I would think, how on earth would I cope with my children at home, you know, without any training? And you think, oh well, we could do this and this and this, and then you realize, but parents haven't had that training. They just don't know. They're following what school have been given, and that's hard. It's hard enough for any child. I think only about a third of children are actually following the school's programs at the moment.
Right.
And that's a statistic we've got from the UK. So that shows that how many, you know, 70% are really not able to engage, you know, meaningfully with what the school are offering at the moment. So it really is scary. And then if you think about people with dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, all those kinds of conditions, it must be really, really tough.
It's incredibly hard. I mean, I have two children, as you know, and one of the secondary, one's in primary, and I know from earlier now they're a little bit older, but certainly when they first started school, that I found it very, very challenging at the beginning to know how to help them. It was only because we were lucky enough to be taught about this visual system. And I, you know, was really, really lucky in that my older son, I think, was 5 at the time. Gosh, I can't believe it's been that long since we've been using this. But definitely without that, and can't see at the moment, but up on, you know, my younger son who's 10, he comes in here to do his schoolwork, so he's not up yet, but that's okay. We don't have a very strict timetable, because I think that's a lot of worry around for parents as well, as they think, you know, kids have to be up and they have to be kind of, you know, doing schoolwork, you know, in that kind of really strict routine back at school. And I certainly, that doesn't work in my house. You know.
Yes, I think everybody's different. Every child, some children really thrive on that kind of routine, but others don't, and there's no kind of right way. So it's going with whatever the child needs. Obviously not if they're trying to Skype, but still.
No. and that's one of the most common comments that I see coming up in a lot of the groups, is concentration.
Yes.
You know, and this, if they would just sit down and actually just concentrate for long enough, you know, they could get their work done. And for a student who's not struggling, concentration is going to be a challenge.
Yes, definitely.
For many, many students, but particularly for those who are. So what is it you would recommend for that?
Oh gosh, for concentration and focus. Oh, a few things. Right. Well, I think the first thing is to recognize that the children are going to be in quite a fragile emotional state at the moment. And so therefore, I think expectations have to be adjusted. I mean, even when you're a teacher in a classroom, yes, you've got all the stuff that you need to do, but if children are upset or angry, something traumatic has happened to them, then you have to down tools and really get them into a proper rate, you know, properly effective learning state before you can teach anything. So I think the idea that you can suddenly switch from being, you know, out of your routine, you're missing your friends, you're under great emotional strain, really. We all, I mean, we're not all, but I mean, the vast majority of people are, and certainly young children who are being deprived of their school, their mates and their routines, are going to be in a very difficult, challenged state. And to expect them to go, okay, right, now I'm just going to sit down, open my book, and I'm going to get on and do my work. perfectly is an expectation too far. So the first thing to do is to recognize what's going on for the children and to talk and listen, really listen to what their experience is at this moment in time, before you even start learning.
And just from my own experience, again, I've got kids at home, and you know, they're both dealing with it quite differently. You know, my teenager is actually quite happy to not be going back to school, to be honest. He's
Yes.
you know, he's very self-motivated though, so that I'm very, very lucky
Yeah.
on that front. Yes, he does it in his own time and in his own way, and sometimes that can be frustrating because, you know, it's eating into maybe the evening or whatever. However, he's getting on with it, and he can motivate, he can teach himself. He's quite good at that. But my 10-year-old is a totally different story. But one of the things I think is to look beyond the behavior.
Absolutely.
You know,
What is
look
the yes
behind it, you know,
because the behavior is telling you something. I firmly used to believe that well, I do believe that no child wants to behave badly. They want to do well. They want to please you.
Yeah. So this is the first time that we've done this. So sorry, I'm trying to see where.
Right.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I firmly used to believe.
Sorry, I was trying to see because we're on Zoom and I can't see the comments. So I was just looking. It's so bizarre.
Is anybody out there?
Yeah, Des is there. So hi, Des. I'm going to give a shout out to Des. I think some people will be watching the recording, so some people will be up and working away at their jobs or working with their kids already. So
that's good. Or doing their exercises in the morning, which is an important thing to do as well. So it's getting back to the focus. I don't think any children really purposely want to behave badly or want to do badly in their work and in their studies. And so there's a story behind that. And just sitting and listening, really listening to the child's experience is going to be a very big first step. And then there are ways that you can calm the system down to get ready for learning. And of course, morning exercise is one of them. You know, Joe Wicks's get up, that physical activity. It livens the body, livens the mind, and gets you more into that kind of positive learning state. So physical exercise. We use something called grounding. So I want to talk about that for a bit, Sarah.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of really explain the importance of using a particular, rather than just expecting a child to just concentrate, you know, and I think we can all remember being back at school ourselves, you know, and the teacher saying, right, come on, settle down, you know, concentrate, and or our parents saying, you know, concentrate, focus, and just being told to concentrate and focus, you know, if you don't know how to do those things,
sure,
is actually extremely difficult. So we're all about strategies. We're all about understanding actually how does the mind actually work, what's actually happening inside the brain, and to give actual techniques to then be able to get people so they can focus and concentrate themselves. And this is for adults as well, by the way. This is not just children. I teach this to every client that comes through the door, whether it's to do with learning or anything else. For me personally, it has totally changed actually everything in my life, to be honest, because in any one moment, if you are feeling stressed or overwhelmed, or you know, even if you're not actually necessarily in that negative state, but you're just not quite in that kind of focused frame of mind, it's so powerful and it's so easy. But I think before we kind of go into explaining it, it's just to explain what's happening inside the mind. And if I always say, obviously we're incredibly complex creatures. The way our brains work is even though there's vast amounts of research and studies done and everything else, we're still really nowhere near to finding exactly how it is we learn and how we, you know, how we're forming memories and all those things. They're so complex. But if we think about the two kind of main areas of the brain, so the front of the brain, you know, our short-term memory, our what's called working memory, where we're figuring things out and everything else, that's going on at a very kind of conscious level. And then we have the back of the brain, which is our long-term memory, where we're storing everything. And when we need it, it comes back up. And we just think about these two main areas and just the flow of information between the two. And a little piece of the brain, which is so tiny but so vital, called the hippocampus. And everything goes through that part of the brain, either coming in to storage or out of storage to be used now. And it's so fascinating to find out that when we're stressed, that part of the brain really doesn't work very well. And when I discovered this piece of information in a little tiny book, I've actually got it sitting here, it made such a lot of sense in terms of going blank. You know, if you're in a test or an exam or an interview or even an argument, and you just have that going blank feeling where you know the information, but you just can't get it out. It's the same as information going in. If you're under stress and you're trying to learn something, you're actually working against the way your brain is designed to learn. Because if you're stressed, you think you're in danger. And you're not designed to be sitting still and learning, you know, your 6 times table or learning your 6 spellings for today and try to come up with sentences and everything else. So that underlying stress that so many people are now experiencing is really going to hold them back in terms of their learning. And it's not because they can't learn. It's simply that their bodies and their brains are not in a state. So I'm actually going to let you take that through. I'm going to see if there's any questions coming in. So if the body suddenly comes up for some weird reason, bear with me.
Okay. Looking for questions. Got any questions?
So if there's any questions, people can. So right, okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about grounding. So this is just a really, really practical way of getting the body calm but the mind open. Because there's lots of lovely things out there that gets everything so calm, but that's not necessarily the learning state, is it?
No, we don't want people to be in a complete sort of hypnotic or hypnagogic state that we're talking about, the trance state. We want the mind and the body to be alive and focused, but also very relaxed, so that we're turning off, if you like, that fight, flight, freeze mechanism that you were talking about with the hippocampus. So we want to send messages to the body that we're calm, everything's fine, and now I can change my state and I can be calm and relaxed and focused. So one of the easiest and quickest methods that we've come across is the grounding. And in this one, you can do it with your eyes open, you can do it with your eyes shut. It's good to start sometimes it's just standing because you've got more of your weight against the floor, the ground, but you can also do it seated. And all you do is to take your attention from the top of your head down through your body, just being aware. And you can do that as quickly, and sometimes you have to do it slowly just to get used to the feeling, down through your body and down, down, down into your feet. So all your attention goes to your feet. You feel your toes against the ground, your heels against the ground, both feet really firmly against the ground. And then, in whatever way is good for you, you imagine or you just think that from the soles of your feet, the roots are going to go down deep, deep, deep into the earth, through the earth's crust, right down, 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 deep, deep, deep into the center of the earth. And your roots are going to spread far and wide and deep, deep, deep into the earth. And then on an up breath, you're going to breathe in wonderful supporting energy from the earth coming up through those roots, right through into your body, filling your body. And then on an out breath, we're going to breathe out. And any stresses and tensions, thoughts, feelings, aches, pains can just be sent right down through your body, through your down roots, and then the energy gets recycled by the earth. And then you can set up a loop. So you're breathing in through those roots, and then out through those roots. Good. Okay. So that's just a very quick way of doing it. Now, some children find that quite challenging, particularly if it's the first time, and I would take a lot longer to do it. You know, might take a couple of minutes, you know, to get the breathing. So for children to go in and just feel their own breathing. Where is their breathing coming from? Is it from the top of the chest? Is it more from the tummy? And just to get, say, be breathing in for 2 and out for 4. Or even you can make it even, in for 3 and out for 3. And that just calms that fight flight impulse, that reaction. It tells the body that everything's okay, we can calm down. So getting that regular breathing going imagining those roots going right down firmly into the ground, so you feel supported, you feel steady, you feel stable, and that frees the mind, you know, and that's really great. And it's lovely now because it's summer, so children can go outside barefoot outside on the earth, on the grass, to have that connection. If children are finding it really difficult, just if you can take them to a tree, or better still a woodland, where they can experience being among trees and feeling that kind of grounding, back to earth sort of sense. Because particularly for children with dyslexia, it can be very crowded inside that brain.
Well, I think that's really, this is one of the main things we really want to talk about today, is about mental imagery and about the visual system, you know, for learning. So there's just a couple of questions just before we get into that. So Des was asking about advice on helping kids, you know, self-calm when they get frustrated or angry with a sibling or a parent. He said, of course, my children never get angry with me. And I think, you know, we've just gone through the grounding, and I think the more that children learn grounding and actually how to do this, and I know this because you've worked with schools in the UK, I've worked with schools here in Ireland. I think over 70 staff from over 70 schools have done the training here, and the biggest takeaway they get is grounding, because it's not just for children with any kind of learning difficulties. As I said, it's actually for everybody. It is a very practical, very quick system that can help in the moment to just bring yourself back to the present, back into your body, and really control, you know, everything that's actually going on. And it really does work. And it is a skill, though, and it is an exercise that needs to be done. It doesn't work if people don't do it.
That's right. And I remember at school when we had to do a lot of anger management in school, and you haven't just got a couple of children, you've got 30 children with potential anger issues. So one of the things we had was a traffic light system, and we had red was just stop. So first of all, you would notice where the anger is coming from in your body, and you'd know that we talk about it starts in my tummy, or it starts up here, or I clench my fist, or so, and that as soon as you get the first little sign of anger, stop. Whatever you're doing, just freeze. You know, we used to practice the freezer. So the first thing, you see red, and you stop. And then in the amber moment, that's the time when you go into your body and you start questioning what's going on. So you get your breathing under control, as we've just talked about, because obviously that's the first thing that goes, isn't it? The breathing, you start panicking. So
yes, a lot of people hold their breath when they're stressed.
Get the breathing under control, and that's the first thing to do. Then we used to ask the children to think about the thoughts that are coming into their minds. So what am I thinking at the moment? What are the thoughts? Like, I sister or whatever, and I want to. So you've got those thoughts. So you just notice the thoughts. So the amber phase is just noticing the thoughts, noticing those thoughts, and thinking, what can I do? What can I do? So you have to come up with some choices. Okay, I can hit, and then you start thinking, what are the consequences of that? So you get them to think about some choices of their behavior. And then I didn't know about grounding in those days, but I would do the grounding now. Then when you're calm, a little bit calmer, do the grounding. And then the green is go and make the right choice.
Well, so green for grounding as well. So
that's nice. Actually, yes, green for, so you can ground.
You're grounded, you're in green,
grounded,
safe, everything's calmed down. Because I had a great expression, you know, not that long ago, which was when emotions go up, intelligence goes down.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. We all know that. We all know that. Even adults, you know, at my ripe old age, you know, that can happen. So I think certainly
that's really key here, is that we are, you know, these are normal human reactions, that when you're in that high emotional state, you know, that our logical thinking brain, you know, goes down. So the more we can teach grounding, just as, you know, throughout the day, you know, you just stop, you just get, so it takes 1 minute. It's very quick, it's very easy. And I have put a link, I think I put it at the top of the link. If not, I'll put it underneath this video afterwards, which is that we are, during COVID-19 lockdown, giving our parents course, online parents course, completely for free. Yeah. There's no massive follow-up emails and upselling and all that kind of stuff. We just said, look, you know, and so the grounding technique and understanding, you know, the script and everything else that you can take people through, and explaining that to your child and for yourself. Because as parents, if we're not grounded, how can we expect our child to be?
Oh, yes.
You know, so there's a lot of that going on, which is parents are you know, up to 90, very Irish expression, but you know, very you know, very stressed with all the things that are going on, and then to expect our children to just behave perfectly when maybe we're not in a fantastic state. It's so important really for the whole family to have a technique that everybody can use, everyone can understand. And if people can't get the grounding and the roots, we've got some other things that people can do as well. You know, the breathing is very, very important.
Yes, and I think for some children find it very, very difficult. The attention deficit, there's so many disorders around at the moment, aren't there? But children find it very difficult to be still. That's why I suggest to go out and walking outside, and you know, they might need to do something very physical. So running or skipping. Skipping is a great thing because it helps the coordination as well.
Trampoline, go out and
trampoline, just bring that, yes.
It really brings them into their bodies, things like that. A lot of physical exercise, and it is really, really important. So it's fantastic. Okay, so we've got another couple of questions. So one is from Lucy. Good morning, Lucy.
Hi, Lucy.
And she's just talking about explaining mental imagery for the first time to a child. So I think before we get into that, let's just talk a little bit about visual learning versus auditory learning. And you know, typically what is being used in schools. So if we go back to spelling and reading, so you know, as I said, you've got to be in the right learning state before you do anything else. So if your child's really not in a state to sit down and to learn, it's going to be frustrating for everybody. So it's so important to do that piece first.
Yes.
And if it's not possible at that time, to leave it and come back a little bit later, you know, because the more we try and force it, of course, it's like telling someone, you know, go to sleep. Go to sleep. You know, you can't just, you have to let the body just, you know, be in the right state and the mind to be open to be able to learn. So often in schools, I know here and in the UK, phonics is the predominant way of teaching people how to read.
Yes.
So I'm going to hand over to you to explain to parents what is phonics, because sometimes, you know, we hear jolly phonics and we hear, you know, all these different systems. So what is phonics?
Well, phonics really, people would say, is the bedrock of learning to read and spell. Phonics is being aware of the sounds that we make around. That's not phonics, it's phonology. Phonological awareness is being aware of the sounds that are around us, and also being aware of the sounds that we make as we speak. So obviously the sounds that we speak, as we say a word like hello, that's got a sound string to it. And then also, because of our civilization, we've developed a writing system. So we can actually write down hello in symbols, which are obviously letters. And so letters represent the sounds that we make in our speech. So phonics breaks those sounds down. So we hear the word cat, for example, and you might hear just cat. What we need to do with phonics is to break that down. How is that sound made up? How is that word made up? So we can identify the k sound, and we can identify the a sound, and we can identify the t sound at the end. And that's what phonics does. So it takes the sounds of the words that we're trying to express and takes those sounds apart to their smallest section. We call it a phoneme. So the cat has got 3 phonemes. That's k, a, and then we put them back together again. So that's called segmenting, and then putting them back together again is called blending. And then eventually the children go cat, and cat becomes the word, and then you've got the symbol there. So that's basically what phonics is all about. And then you build up to different sounds. Now obviously in English it's quite a challenging language, because we've got 26 letters in our alphabet, and those 26 letters are used to make up 44 sounds. So when we say the words like hello or how are you or although, we've got 44 basic sounds in the English language. When you come to write those sounds down, they're called graphemes. That's how you actually write these sounds. Oh my goodness, they are in the hundreds There are
Well,
hundreds
the
of different
minimum,
variations.
I think from what I mean, because we investigated this, we wanted to see was there a definitive number. So 26 letters in the alphabet, 44 sounds in our language, and we found there's a minimum of 250.
Minimum 250. Yes.
Of creating those 44 sounds with those 26 letters, and some sites said even up to 1,000. You know, if something really obscure spellings and everything else. So English is very deep in terms of the number of ways that we can create those sounds with our letters. And so when we come down to then dyslexia, children who phonics isn't, and we know this from stats that are around about 20% of children find phonics very, very challenging. It means 80%, it works for 80%, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. And when phonics was introduced, there really wasn't, particularly in the UK, and I think Ireland was the same, there wasn't really a uniform way of teaching reading and spelling in our schools. And so over time, with the literacy hour and the national curriculum, they realized still there was this difficulty with so many children with their reading and spelling ability. And so a scheme was introduced, and it's called synthetic phonics, and that's what it is. It's because you break it down, you segment it, and then you blend it back together as I've described. And that did have a huge success for around 80% of the children. So we've got this uniform system of synthetic phonics, as it's called in the schools now. But I think uniformity can be great because it's consistency and it's equality of opportunity for all children. On the other hand, it has a very big disadvantage in a lack of flexibility. And so we've got a stubborn 20% for whom synthetic phonics patently is not working. It's been in the system for 10 years now.
At least, I think it's
I think it was in 2009 it became mandatory in schools. And for 20% it still isn't working. But time and time again you go into schools and phonics is the only thing on offer.
It's what's being used in the mainstream class, and then it's what's being used as an intervention.
And then you just have extra phonics. So
just slower, you know, and thinking that if they just keep doing enough of it, eventually it will work, it will click. Yeah. But we know, because we've worked with children and adults, I mean, I did my research. That simply doing the same thing over and over again, if it hasn't worked really by the time they're 7 or 8, it's probably not really going to work as effectively as perhaps another system. And we know from looking at brain scans, one of the main things that's happening inside the mind and so the brain of someone with dyslexia is, out of the 3 areas of the brain that are necessary for fluent reading, only one of them is really lighting up. You know, it's for some people, it's the only one that's lighting up. So so if we talk about the 3 areas of the brain necessary for reading, we've got, the sounds, absolutely. So that's phonics. It's recognizing when we see those letters, what are the corresponding sounds, you know, either within the whole word or individually within the word. Then we also have the visual elements. So when we see the word, you know, what are we actually seeing? So what have we got stored in our brain that we can recognize? So you'd recognize your own name, you'd recognize, you know, words very, very quickly. So fluent readers are not segmenting and blending. They're not doing that. It's called rapid automatic naming. Is that right? So
well, there are 2 schools of thought. Some thought is that it isn't just incredibly rapid segmenting and blending. The other side of it says actually there is what's called a word form area in the brain, and you have got the image is stored in the word form area.
It's a visual word bank, essentially.
It's a visual word bank, yeah.
So we've got all these words stored. I mean, it's like when you're writing something and you write it and you look at it, you go, that doesn't look right. Like, well, why doesn't it? What are you comparing it to? You must be comparing it to something that you've already stored. So that there is a visual element. Anyway, we know this from fluent readers' brains.
Absolutely.
There's a visual part of the brain will light up. There's a recognition, you know, very, very quickly. We know Georgetown University did a lot of research.
Yes.
And they proved that actually it's the visual system that's being used.
It's the visual system.
And then we have the semantic. We have the meaning of the word. So, you know, the analysis. What does the word mean? We've got some very obvious ones, concrete nouns like cat, dog, elephant, bus, you know, etc. So they don't really require context to understand the word. We know what those words mean. But then we have much more complex words that they don't make sense unless you've read the whole sentence and you understand the story and everything else. So out of those 3 areas of the brain, they all light up very, very quickly. They all work together. We know that those with dyslexia, from the work of Sally Shaywitz, she showed that it was the front part of the brain, the Broca's area, which is the pronunciation, how does it sound, that was the predominant area that was lighting up, that the other two, the visual recognition and the meaning of the word, were not lighting up. And that really was quite interesting, because the focus then was, well, we have to do more phonics. It's like, well, actually you're missing the other two areas. I'm not quite sure where they decided to go on to phonics, but we know that you can teach visual skills.
I think this has been the problem, if you like, because before we had the look and say, which has been deeply discredited now, because that was look at the word like on a flashcard, and you would just, if you looked at it long enough, it would somehow, you would remember it, you would recall it. But they were missing the point as well, because for some people, and getting back to the question, Lucy's question about mental imagery, not everybody can just look at something and form a mental image and then store that mental image and then retrieve that mental image. We're all different in the way that we do that process. And so this is why that system was discredited. But people are kind of like either or. So you're either auditory or you're completely visual. No, actually they need to be working together.
You've got the three areas of the brain, they've all got to be working.
You need to understand the meaning, you need to hear the sounds, and you need to be able to form a visual image of it and store it in your word bank. So with the underlying visual skills are not being taught. So if you think about Jolly Phonics, or you think about letters and sounds in the UK, which is being used, they're all auditory based, sometimes with the movement as well. So you'll go kind of, for snake, and you make the action of the snake and so on. But they're missing out on teaching these very, very valuable underlying visual skills. And I think we are all different, because if we ask, each other, or Desi or Lucy, anybody who's listening to the call, just picture.
And Anne-Marie's there too, so hi Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie, hi Anne-Marie. Picture an elephant. We're all going to see something slightly different. A very, very small minority might not be consciously aware of seeing anything at all in their mind's eye. As we're talking about, constructing an image inside your head, in your mind's eye. So there's a whole spectrum, isn't there, of mental imagery.
And this was really the thing that made so much sense for me when I learned about the visual system, was that not everyone sees things the same way.
Absolutely.
And we sort of know that, but until you actually start asking questions and really investigating what's happening inside someone's mind, you just don't know. And they don't know that the way that they're thinking is different from everybody else either. So one of the things that's very, very frustrating for children who are struggling with spelling and reading is they are not putting in any less effort. In fact, they tend to be putting in way more effort. They're trying even harder than their peers.
Absolutely.
And yet they're seeing that the results are not the same. So that they don't know what's happening inside the mind of a fluent reader or someone who's a really good speller. They don't see what the process is. And even really, really good spellers, actually, when we teach them this process, they hate it because it's happening. They're doing it so quickly that to slow it down, they're just going, no, I know my strategy, and I know it works. So they actually don't like to kind of interfere with it or to slow it down, because it's like, no, it works really quickly. However, we know from discovery questions, by asking children and adults that we've worked with, what's happening inside their mind, it's such a revelation.
Oh.
But for me, initially, when I started understanding how different people were actually seeing things, it was really eye-opening. And I think for parents at home, if they're watching this and their child is struggling, to start asking them these questions will really be a light bulb moment, not just for the child, but for the adult as well who's working with them.
That's right. Not to think about words, but just to start off with Lucy's question was, how do you start talking about them? Just share what you see. Think of start with concrete objects or people. So think of animals are great to start with, because children love them. Think of a giraffe. What do you see inside your mind? And it just opens up such a, from somebody just seeing a vague, sort of smoky feeling or sense of a giraffe, you know, maybe thinking of, you know, long shape, which is
why don't we play? Why don't we play?
Oh, should we do?
We've got a few people watching here.
Oh, have we? Oh, lovely.
A few people. So why don't we do that? Why don't we say a word, and then without watching what other people are typing, the minute we say the word, you know, just notice, if you're watching at home, what happens inside your mind. What are you actually thinking of? I'm sure everyone's now thinking of giraffes, because you said the word giraffe, and it's very hard to not think about something when you hear it. And what's interesting is actually when you said giraffe, to me, I didn't even see a whole giraffe. I actually just saw the pattern on a giraffe.
Yes, yes, yes.
Me. So maybe we'll just use that then. So when Paula said giraffe, you know, just type in the chat box, what did you Anne-Marie said, Sarah, you thought of me? I'm not quite sure why.
Are you wearing a giraffe print today, Anne-Marie?
So there's going to be a little bit of a delay because there's a delay using Zoom.
Sure.
So we'll just see what comments come back in here. So yeah, but I do remember a very funny story of a friend of mine who had a really, really creative, and this is the other thing as well, is that the visual system for people with dyslexia tends to be off the charts in terms of their ability to see things, to you know, explore things in a kind of big picture way, to be able to make connections between visually, to, you know, lots of moving pictures, seeing lots of screens maybe simultaneously, things like that. And she said the word giraffe to her graphic designer, and she said, she said, can you think of a giraffe? He was like, yes. And she goes, okay, so tell me what you see. And he didn't just see a giraffe, he saw the entire Serengeti.
Yeah.
So he saw multiple giraffes plus everything else that was then connected in his mind. So it worked really, really quickly. Now, if you think about that, so Lucy says she sees a cartoon giraffe.
Right.
So again, if you imagine you're trying to teach the word giraffe, and in the child's mind, they have the entire Serengeti scene going on. Where are they attaching the word giraffe? You know, what are they attaching it to? And a lot of people don't realize that there's actually, for a lot of people, there's so much going on inside them that trying to then teach something as boring and two-dimensional and flat and you know, not very interesting as a word, and the way the word looks really doesn't actually match with the way at that moment that their brains are actually working. And again, on the course, so Lucy says, oh, a real giraffe in a zoo, chewing the way her son does.
Oh, that's great.
That brings up and so straight away I've got mental imagery of, you know, I don't know what the sun looks like, but someone chewing like a giraffe. That'd be quite interesting.
That's good. And you're so right, because the mental imagery can be so rich and so lively and so vibrant in there that when you come to actually think about getting the mental picture of the word, of the letters, it's just too crowded in there. Plus the fact, if you're used to having your mental imagery dancing around, you've got upteen giraffes prancing along the prairies and munching and doing all this sort of thing.
Anne-Marie's saying that she's got multiple images, patterns, essentially every visual of a giraffe she's ever stored.
Wow.
So that's pretty crowded. That's a lot of information.
That is really crowded. So one of the first things that we do is to investigate. We kind of go like a really sort of deep forensic investigation of what is the quality of the mental imagery, and that is the first place that we have to start, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you actually hold an image still? Because for some people they're constantly moving around or fuzzy. Is it? And we look at the qualities of the image. Is it fuzzy? Is it sharp and clear? Is it, how big is it? Whereabouts in the brain do you feel to see it? So really investigating in depth the quality of the mental image, because what we want to do is to be able to control it. So we want to be able to get rid of the information that we don't need and focus on the bits that we do. And when we are focusing, make sure that they're really sharp and clear and the right size and so on. So that would be the second step. And of course it links with the grounding, doesn't it? Because if you're really grounded, very, very well grounded, then that will have an effect on your mental imagery, on the quality of your mental imagery. It will stabilize it, help to stabilize it.
Exactly. And this is really not known. This is not something that most teachers, unless they've done this training, unless they've actually gone down this particular route, truly understand is the link between actually the mental imagery, the quality of the mental imagery, and then the ability to control that mental imagery, starting off with images and then moving on to words. Because if you can't control mental imagery for pictures, then words are incredibly difficult. So that's why the classic symptoms of dyslexia, not every dyslexic does this, but is letter reversals or whole word reversal, transposing, so was becomes saw, and things like that. And, typically it's P and Q and B and D and things like that. And one of the things is that if they're moving images inside their heads, and the letters, it makes sense that letters are going to be moving around as well. And so they're not quite sure, well, which is the right way, because they're constantly moving. So they haven't got that kind of stored, very fixed. And so we're not stopping people with dyslexia using their amazing visual imagery for art and for design and for, that fantastic entrepreneur thinking and anything like that. Not, in fact, the opposite. It's to give people the ability to control their mental imagery to becoming very flat, two-dimensional, small picture when it comes to words. And then when they want to be more creative, they can go back to their mental imagery being, off the other side of the chart. But if they don't have that choice, and they don't realize that actually what they're doing is a lot of moving in their, things are moving too much inside their heads, and there's too many different thoughts coming in, and maybe they're jumping around from one idea to another, is that they don't understand that there is a very, very simple way, and that is grounding. And grounding, literally, you have to understand what are you doing first of all, and then bring it back in terms of, okay, now you have control. You have a way of controlling it. And thanks very much, Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie says, she said, this training had a huge impact on how she teaches. She's a teacher up in Belfast. And
yes, Anne-Marie.
Thank you so much for that comment, because we do know that when we've been out there and we've worked with families, we've worked with teachers, the feedback has been phenomenal, because it's very quick. It's a skill, not a program. I think that's one of the things that we really need to explain as well.
Yes, it's the underlying skill, isn't it? And I know as a teacher, hi, Anne-Marie, for, as I say, decades, 30, 40 years, I knew that there were difficult. I know that that children are different. They do. You ask them kind of what they're doing, but you don't really. It's not considered that you want to really ask those questions, do you? Well, what is your cat like? How big is it? You just don't think to ask those questions about the internal processing. You present information visually, you explain it, you find all different wonderful creative ways to explain it to a child, and then you see what you get out, but you don't really, it's kind of unpicking what's in here.
I think I think the word forensic is perfect, because you are doing an investigation in. You're not looking at the output. You're not just looking at someone's spelling or what they're saying or what they're writing or what they're reading or anything like that. You're actually investigating what is actually happening for that person inside their mind. And it is so different. It's unbelievable. I often use cat because a lot of people don't like cats. So I often look for the negative reaction in the group of teachers when I'm working with them. It's about understanding that when you start asking these questions, okay, if I say this word, what do you think of? And you start off with just a single words, and then obviously as mental imagery becomes, clearer in terms of what's going on, you then expand it to sentences and paragraphs and books. So I read a very interesting comment the other day, and it was with adults with dyslexia group, and they said, is it possible to have dyslexia and enjoy reading? And I thought it was such a good question, and there was lots and lots and lots of comments, and people talked about they listened to audio books, that they found a way around it. One person said it took them a year to read a book, and they really struggled and hated the whole process. And one of the things that we often hear is that children hate reading. And you have to think about that. Well, why? Because the reality is, if they love a subject, and everyone loves something, everyone's interested in something, and you read around that topic, why wouldn't you enjoy it? And of course, it's because it's the reading bit that is such a chore. It's heartbreaking to listen to somebody constantly segment and blend and break apart and put together, and they've just successfully decoded the word on one sentence, and then it appears again, and it's as if it's a brand new word on the next page. And it's like, what is going on? There's no fluidity, there's no fluency in their reading, and there's obviously no comprehension because there's no punctuation being used and no intonation and things like that. And the reality is, it's because they're so focused on reading, they're not taking the meaning and not doing something with those words. And that's what mental imagery, that's the power of mental imagery. I know when I read a book, and I'm an avid reader, that's a fraction of the books behind me, and I know you are too, with our bookshelves very prominently, and I've just realized in our videos, is that when we're reading, we're making sense of things visually. Predominantly, it's the visual system. We're creating pictures, we're creating movies. And one of the things I often ask people is, if they're an avid reader, when you've read the book and then you see the movie, how do you feel? And most people feel incredibly disappointed, because the image that they see on the screen doesn't match the amazing images that they've actually created of the book. People who are not doing that will hate reading.
Of course, because it is such a struggle if you're going to decode, because for most brains, the 80% of the children, those early years, those early practicing of the segmenting and the blending, eventually it becomes automatic, and they just know the word. You know, you just know it
into that word bank. So they're segmenting,
and it works automatically in the brain. So they segment and blend often enough. They've got the sounds, they know how it works, they can relate the symbol of the letter to the sound, and they can form, and automatically in that brain the word image is formed in the word form area, and it works seamlessly. But for some people who've got auditory processing difficulties and visual processing difficulties, that process does not work automatically. So therefore, you never get to the stage where you just know those words. It's always an effort. It's always the conscious effort to do the mechanics of the reading. And what our process is, by bringing in the visual, by bringing in the sort of activating that visual element, that visual memory, that visual pathway, giving, really practicing these underlying visual skills, we can improve them. We're not saying it's a magic wand, it's not a silver bullet, and it's not going to magically make every difficulty
silver bullets
disappear.
For werewolves. I think it's a magic.
Sorry, it's a magic. What is it?
It's a magic bullet.
A magic bullet, not a silver bullet. Oh no, we don't want to go there. It's not a magic bullet, not a magic wand. We're not waving any magic wands or magic bullets. And delete the mental image. And so I've lost my train of thought.
Sorry, no, it's not. It isn't something that the minute someone, but it does go a very long way.
Yes.
In terms of then whatever program a child is using at school, whatever the school's predominant reading system is, that if they learn how to develop and control their mental imagery, their visual learning system, they can actually activate it and really get it engaged. I mean, if you think, I love the expression, a picture is 1,000 words.
Oh,
our visual system processes the majority of the information from the outside world. The other senses combined are only 1/10 of what the visual system can actually do. And yes, and Anne-Marie was just talking about when words drop off the page and when words are moving on the page as well. So it's not, so what the beauty of grounding and controlling and developing mental imagery is that the external eye can also calm down enough as well, so that words can stop moving, and people, who form these like channels between words, and all the really very interesting but very quite distressing things that can happen when someone's trying to read and the words are not staying still on the page, that actually it works both ways as well. And I know people can use overlays and there's other things as well, but grounding it goes a very, very long way towards it. And so once they can develop their mental imagery and their visual system, and we know, because we did research in terms of what were the key skills necessary for fluent reading, and I think out of the 6 key skills, 5 of them were visual. One was phonics, was the phonological kind of awareness. The rest were all very much about to be able to see a word, to see the letters distinctly, to see the word as a whole, to be able to move on. We won't go into it because it's quite kind of technical and it's not necessary. for this talk this morning, but just we know that the predominant system is the visual system. And the great news is that that can be understood, it can be developed, it can be trained. You know, people can make a choice to actually to use their visual system more than the other systems, and to develop their fluency in terms of and spelling as well.
Yes, because we focus more on the internal, don't we, the mind's eye. So yes, there's all sorts of, we won't get into the sort of medical thing of that, actually how the eye works to look at the print, because they're obviously, you know, behavioral optometrists sort of do a lot of work in terms of how your eye is actually going to take that image physically. But certainly the internal mental imagery can be very well developed and used and improved, and can be transformative. We've seen people just go, oh, you mean you want me to see a picture of the word inside my mind's eye? Oh, well, okay, I can do that then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because nobody has actually explained to them that's what you need to do.
And for people who do that naturally, they don't understand the people who are not spelling or reading very well, that they're not doing that there is this very important underlying skill that if someone doesn't have it, then it's going to be incredibly difficult. Yeah. Not impossible, but incredibly difficult to then become, you know, a proficient speller and a fluent reader. And one of the things about, especially in English, you know, spelling is pretty insane. I mean, I often look at words and think, who decided that was how, you know, we were going to spell these words, and particularly silent letters, homophones, you know, words that sound the same but are spelt differently and have different meanings. Heteronyms, words that are spelt the same but are pronounced differently and have different meanings. I mean, the English language is pretty insane. So if we're only focusing on the sound side of it, we're missing a huge element of actually our language, and our language is predominantly visual. You know, the written language is a visual system. So there's just a couple of questions. So we've only got a few minutes left. One was about handwriting and typing. So in our course, so just very quickly before you answer the question there, Paula, we cover spelling, we cover reading, and we do cover handwriting. Yes. And we do have an opinion over typing versus writing, don't we?
We do. I mean, I know we're short for time. So handwriting, yeah, again, we link with the mental imagery, because it's very, very difficult, almost impossible, to write for children if they haven't got the image of what they're trying to write inside their mind's eye. Because if you just think, if you haven't got an image of what an A looks like inside your mind's eye and you're trying to write it, it's really, really hard. So mental imagery is the foundation, if you like, for the handwriting. Thinking about handwriting and typing, well, yes, I think assistive technology is really, really important for people with dyslexia, with any sort of difficulty in spelling. But when you're actually coming to learn the spellings, because you've actually got to know how to spell before you type, haven't you? I mean, you can't, there's no magic keyboard that just puts the letters in the right order for you. You've got to have a notion of how that word is going to be spelled even before you use spell check. So it's muscle memory. So by actually forming the letters, using the mental imagery, using your muscle memory of your hand, making it really helps you to get that image into that long-term memory. But we go into a lot more detail about that on the course, and it's completely free.
It is free. This is not no upselling. It's just, it is what it is. That's the program there. As you said, it's usually €97. We're giving it completely for free during this time, because we just want to help as many children out there and their parents, and whether the parents have dyslexia themselves as well, it works equally well for adults, you know, in terms of understanding that. And the other thing is that we know from research is that from university students in particular, what they looked at when they looked at students who handwrote notes and those who typed, you often see, you know, people have got their laptops out there, and are they really taking notes, or are they watching something? Who knows? But what they actually found was that memory works better when we handwrite, in terms of, because you have to summarize and you have to make your notes, whereas often when people are typing, it's verbatim, and they're almost bypassing the kind of meaning making and embedding that information actually in their mind. So they actually found that hand now, obviously. And the other interesting thing about typing is that it's another skill. You know, you still have to find the letters on the keyboard. You still have to recognize the letters. And as you said, if you don't understand how to spell, and then you spell it, it's a correct spelling, but it's the wrong version, you know, you won't get that red squiggly line. Now, we know that there is, you know, you can dictate, and I think it's, there's lots of software out there where you can dictate, and but the ability to actually write something yourself is still an essential skill. We totally believe that being able to write, you know, if your laptop goes down, if you're somewhere and you don't have something and you want to be able to take something, filling in forms, you know, when you're older, you know, whatever it is, in a bank, wherever you are, the handwriting is still really, really an essential skill. And we believe we need both, because we live in a world of technology and an era of technology. We all need to be able to touch type, really, at the end of the day. It'd be fantastic, but doing both. And it's like going back to right at the beginning, we were talking about, you know, phonics and you know, look, say, synthetic phonics, look, say, and the reality is we really need both. But the visual skill is the one that, without that, makes everything else, you know, so much more difficult. Lucy was just asking about a metaphor for introducing visualization. I don't think you really need a metaphor. I think you just need to just ask the questions. And we have all of the discovery questions, you know, on the course. And, you know, we'd love to hear feedback from any parents who have done the course and who have worked their way through to, if they have questions, anything like that, they can come back. We've only got a few minutes left here, Paula. So anything else you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
I think just make it fun.
Yeah.
Because it can be so hard and such a slog for people who don't just get it, you know, in the normal sense. And I think the more that we can make it fun with images and with spelling, I mean, once you've been through our program, for example, and you've got the grounding to stabilize the state, and you've got the mental imagery under control, and people can, your child can really see the word in the mind's eye, then have fun with it, because you can learn quite long words, and the words that will stick in your mind are the words that you've got some sort of emotional sense to them. So whatever I remember one boy learned through spelling footballers' names, incredibly complex, you know, foreign surnames, but because he really wanted to learn those names, that developed the skill. So it really doesn't matter what words you're using, just use those words to develop that skill of seeing the words in the mind's eye. Then in fact you can deconstruct it from that. So if you've learned how to spell I don't know, September, you can break that down from September into September, and that's a different way of doing phonics. It's from the big picture down to the detail, and that can be quite good for a dyslexic player, because they like finding patterns. So if you've learnt mice, you can do nice, and you can do slice or spice. It's finding patterns. So it's working with patterns, working with imagery, working with words that are exciting or creative or emotional in some way.
But definitely follow the child, whatever the child is interested in. Find words that mean something to them. There's an emotional connection, absolutely. And you know, if it's dinosaur names, if it's you know, footballers' names. I had one child I worked with, and it was all the characters and the planets from Transformers. You know, and that was amazing. These were 10, 12 letter words, and this child went from 0 out of 10 every week for spelling test to 10 out of 10. You know, and it was just remarkable, because it suddenly, the system made sense. It's a system for learning. And then you can, as we said, you can then apply it to whatever program your child is following at school, in terms of the order of, you know, the words they're learning and things like that. So it really is an essential underlying skill. We really can't stress that enough. And once you can do it for spelling, people's reading improves, because they're recognizing the words, they're creating mental imagery of and you know, just a very quick thing to maybe end on is just to develop mental imagery very quickly, is also to read to the child and see what they come back with in terms of what were they thinking. So that's another way of doing that. Well, we do cover all of that in our course. If you didn't see the link at the beginning of this, we're going to put it underneath the video. And please go ahead and sign up. It's only about 2 hours long, and the whole training is only about 2 hours long.
Genuinely free, please. We just want to get the message out there.
We just want to help as many people as possible, and we know a lot of parents are struggling. So if you've been watching this morning, thank you so much for joining us live. We know it was very short notice. We kind of came up with this at the last minute, and we're actually going to be back next Wednesday morning again. We'll come back next Wednesday from 9 till 10, and in the meantime, any questions you have, you can either drop an email to me or on this page on Facebook. Sign up, have a look, have a go, see what happens. It's really, really, very exciting work for us that we've been involved with for a very long time, and we just love to share it. Paula, thank you so much for joining.
Oh, thank you, Sarah, as always. Thank you, everybody who's joined in today.
Lovely. Okay, we'll chat to you soon.
Bye-bye.